Hello and welcome to the Cinema Savvy Movie Podcast, the channel for film reviews, discussions and everything in between. I'm Chris Garner, joined by my co-host George Aldridge, and today is another episode of our Film Club series. What this is our midweek show where at the end of our main show we recommend a movie, we take it in turns each week picking a film that vaguely ties into whatever we reviewed. This week was Terminator Genesis and it was my turn to pick. And the reason why I picked Shutter Island, which is the movie we'll be reviewing today, is that it was the same screenplay writer, and I'm going to absolutely butcher the pronunciation of this name again. I'm going for Lita Kalogridis. I think that's the name, and she obviously wrote the screenplay for Shutter Island, so that's the film I picked. Before we go into our review, we'll just start off with initial impressions, really, and sort of when we first saw the trailer and what we expected from the film and then what we eventually got from the film. So what were your initial thoughts with this film?
Well, it was a funny one because when it was coming out, I remember being pretty excited, and I remember buying the book first because originally that's what it was. And I read about 3/4 of it, and then just ended up seeing the film because I couldn't be asked anymore. Which it's the wrong way to do it, but it built up for the big twist, which was much better. Because when that kind of happens, that's like the main big thing that happens, and you're kind of oh shit. So I really enjoyed it the first time because it's just the build up and everything's going wrong, which is, you know, it stood out and it was a memorable film, which kind of dampens it the second time. But we'll go into that a bit more.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. And I was actually just checking on here, checking the author of the book, which is Dennis Lehane, I think his name is. He's done a lot of famous books actually that have been turned into films. You got like Mystic River, which was the Clint Eastwood movie. I think it says here he did Gone Baby Gone, stuff like that. So he's written a lot of stuff. But yeah, I'll kind of echo what you just said there. The first time I saw this film, I think I actually wanted to see this movie in the cinema, but I didn't get to it in time. But the trailer for this film made it look like a very different film to what it actually turns out to be. The trailer was edited and sort of made it look like a generic sort of horror film with Leonardo DiCaprio in. And then when I got it on DVD and watched it for the first time, I was kind of bowled over by how different it was. It's more or less like a psychological thriller, really. It has horror elements at parts of it, but at the core of it, I think the story's a lot more involved than just a regular horror film. But I'll completely agree with your point that it does lose a lot of its impact once you've seen it the first time.
Yeah, I mean, because I remember through the trailers, it was him with the flame, and it was almost acting like it was going to try and like jump scare you, which is not what it is at all. But I think with me, I remember seeing like an interview in the morning with Scorsese and DiCaprio on TV, and they were going like, "Oh yeah, it's going to mess with your mind," and they were going on about a big twist there and then. So I kind of got hooked after you knew that. And it was one of them where it wouldn't have worked at all as a horror film, but that's to its strength really, because I prefer these type of films to that. Because if it was doing jump scares and stuff, it'd be incredibly boring and predictable rather than what the final product is.
I think I only really counted sort of one jump scare in this film, which is where he goes into like one of the cell blocks. But other than that, I know a lot of my friends went to see this, and they're sort of the crowd that will see a trailer for like a really bad horror movie and think it's going to be amazing and just go and see it because it's a horror. And I know a lot of people went to see this film and came out and said it was a good movie, but it wasn't what I expected. So I think that the marketing could have been a bit more clever. I think maybe it was trying to get a wider audience, so it was kind of making it look like a film that was sort of generic horror. But I'll go into the plot a bit now for if anyone hasn't seen it. The plot is basically a couple of US Marshals. You've got Leonardo DiCaprio's character called Edward Daniels, and they go to Shutter Island to this asylum where they learned that one of the patients there has escaped, and they're sort of there to investigate it and try and find them. And along the way, they discover a lot more hidden secrets about the place, and by the end of it, not all is what it seems to be, and there's a lot of hidden messages and secrets going on the island. First point I want to bring up in this review, which I noticed a lot more today, I think I've seen this film, including when I watched it before the review, about 3 times all the way through, is the direction. by Martin Scorsese. Very different to his usual kind of films. Obviously, he's most known for films like Goodfellas or Casino or the recent Wolf of Wall Street, sort of gangster, drug-related kind of, gangster films like that. And he may have done like another kind of film like this in the past, but I think this is his straight up one that skirts the line of horror.
Yeah, and this is what I really enjoyed because it doesn't feel like a Scorsese film. And then when
Mm,
you're watching it, you're kind of used to this like broad environment of, look at stuff, The Departed, this, the sort of streets of
yeah.
Britain, where this is so confined. Obviously, it's an island, but when you're inside the cells, it seems so claustrophobic, and it was very effectively in messing with your mind with the sort of lighting and stuff. It was a very different take from him, and I think it works perfectly. But
Mm,
there's one or two bits where when they're on the boat at the start, you've kind of got like blatant colour correction in the background because straight
yeah.
away it's really distracting. But you're given a sense of what's going to come, and then it gets like worse and worse, and you genuinely feel like this is like a disgusting place, and you don't want to be there. And that's the signs of like a successfully directed film.
No, I'm glad you brought up that point about the boat at the start because I was going to bring that up too. It looked a lot like sort of Peter Jackson's 2005 King Kong film. It's very obvious green screen behind them, and the lighting doesn't sort of marry up with the actors on the boat, so you clearly know it's fake. There's no sort of wind blowing through the hair or anything like that to give the illusion that they're on the boat. But what's present as well is, and I'm not quite sure why Scorsese does this, but this is in a lot of his films. Continuity between shots. Like, I think this is one of the films, like, if you're looking at movie mistakes, this is one of the ones that's got the most. Like, a person will, like, touch someone's face, and then in the next shot, they'll have their hands by the side, then the next shot, it will be back on their face, stuff like that. I don't know if he does it for, like, a stylistic thing, but this film's got a lot of them, and it's just a bit weird. And also with the camera, if I am going to put a negative towards this film, is that I don't think that Scorsese kind of brings a style to it which I don't think works in a film like this, like a sort of horror thriller film. What comes to mind is when they first arrive at Shutter Island, and the guard sort of says you've got cell block A to the left and cell block B to the right, and the camera does like a crash sort of spin to each direction, and it seems very out of place in a film like this, which should have. I'm going to sort of compare it to The Shining. It needs very sort of slow and methodical camera angles, but he is at times very frantic with it, and I'm not sure if that works all the
Yeah,
time.
because he goes for his sort of like quick zooms, not like an Edgar Wright one, but when they first go into the building, you kind of see the door, then you get an extreme close up of the door shutting, then it's the normal shot, then it's an extreme close up of a light going on, and you
Mm.
kind of notice it because they do it a lot. And I think it's more or less the sort of indication of like what's to come, but it's very different compared to some of his other work.
Yeah, but as well in this, the cinematography I think is really good. There's a lot of shots that come to mind, notably the one where Leonardo DiCaprio sees visions of his wife and she kind of dissolves into ashes. I'm just looking here now. Robert Richardson was the cinematographer. He did films like, by the looks of it, Platoon, Kill Bill as well. So he's worked with Tarantino on films. Um, and wow, he's worked on a lot of Tarantino films actually. But I think this film is quite beautiful, and it does get very eerie in parts with the imagery because it cuts back to stuff like with the Holocaust in the death camps, and they do a lot of really creepy imagery there with it.
Yeah, that's why I kind of blanked when I was watching it, the kind of behind the scenes stuff, and you forget, and it's quite nasty. I mean, you get a lot of sort of Holocaust films. I haven't seen Schindler's List, but the one that's the most
Mm.
memorable to me um, is The Boy in Striped Pajamas. It's not, and the other one's not a film. It's Band of Brothers, the TV show, and they
Yeah.
capture like the horror of the death camps. And this film builds it well because they kind of go in and they're like disgusted. And it kind of the shot sticks with the bodies that are frozen together, and it's just visually like disgusting. You can kind of feel their anger, and then obviously it'll cut back to the present. Then it kind of reverts back to it later on with like a murder scene of all the SS soldiers. So
Mm.
it gets some of the really nasty stuff because when you think about it, in that era, there have been hundreds and thousands of people that discovered these death camps, and they'll be left like messed up in the head completely.
Mm. And you know what, that plays. I don't know if that's in the book. Obviously, I haven't read the book, but Scorsese's very clever about where he puts these flashbacks into it, because it's always at moments where, all the way through the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, you're always questioning what's actually happening and what's a vision. Um, and you were talking about the look of the asylum as well. It's really perfectly shot. One of the creepiest moments for me is when he's first approaching the asylum, and there's that really sort of creepy woman with the scraggly hair, and this was in the trailer as well, and she kind of goes like, "Shh."
Yeah,
That was just, oh, it's so creepy. And as you said, like, you get in, it's set in the 50s. It's this really old, horrible style, like, mental institute, and you get all like the dark corridors, as you said, and then the blinding lights, like the bit where DiCaprio's character's having the migraines. It's really effectively done, and some of the editing's brilliant in the film as well.
yeah, and that's what I think works in it because it's so fluent. It does the perfect job of it, and then with the lighting, I think the best example is obviously it's the one on the cover of all the film DVDs and stuff.
Mm.
It's with the match as he's approaching the cell,
Oh yeah.
and that whole scene is just done perfectly because it kind of builds up. You know, I forgot the name of the person who is meant to have like lit the match. I think I'm kind of
Oh, it's Ladies, isn't
that's
it?
the one, and obviously
Yeah.
we find out at the end that he makes it up, but they kind of build up that character because you kind of start with a close up and he eventually comes into the light. Then it's kind of like your match is about to go out, and then it hits back. You think there's going to be like a jump scare, but it just carries on as normal. So they kind of build that stuff up perfectly.
And you know, with a lot of films like this, like these psychological thriller slash horror films, a big part of it is like the environment they're in or the place they're in is as much a character as anyone else in the film. Like, you go back to films like The Shining, the hotel itself is a character, and you really get that presence from this film as well with Shutter Island. And if you can get the environment they're in working in, you make it feel oppressive and dark and stuff, then half of your film's done already there, because you're so sucked up into the atmosphere of it. And I've always found sort of like old time asylums and mental institutes really creepy anyway. But when you see it on the big screen, this is a great film to watch like at night or like in the dark with like the sound, because the sound plays a big part in the film as well. Um, but yeah, if we've said every on the asylum and the location and stuff, we can move into actors now if you want.
Yeah, and well, I'll do about the character, but I want to say about the asylum briefly. Is that when I was watching it, it was
Yeah,
broad daylight, and I was kind of like, "This feels wrong," because I sort of
yeah.
mentioned it. It's just a disgusting place, but it was kind of making me think after being on an Arkham hype, like how much they need to make like an Arkham Asylum
Oh
film.
yeah, it'd be great.
But
Yeah. Oh no, I thought exactly the same thing when I first saw the
it, it,
film
it
as
just
well.
builds it up. But if you want to go into characters, that we can go for it because there's a few key players in it.
Oh yeah, and just quickly, I'll say that I watched this movie last night, like 2 or 3 in the morning, and there were some bits in this that got really creepy. But yeah, obviously your main character is Edward Daniels, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, and I kind of talked about this very very briefly at the end of our main review. Leonardo DiCaprio has become my favourite actor working in the business currently. I never actually used to like him in films like Titanic and what was the Shakespeare one? It was Romeo and Juliet. He always kind of played the same type of character. It was the very sort of whiny teenage boy almost character. I just never connected to those kind of roles. But then since then, and especially through Scorsese, because he's always sort of the go-to actor. He's like Tim Burton with Johnny Depp. Like Leonardo DiCaprio always seems to be the main actor that Scorsese goes for. But he's been very smart with the projects he's chosen over the years, and you know, you look at some of the films he's been in, like Inception, Wolf of Wall Street again by Scorsese, and by Tarantino in Django Unchained. Is so good in everything, and obviously he's trying to go for the Oscar, and I do really want him to get one at some point. But he's just got to get that one role that's just going to land it
Well,
for him.
I think The Revenant is potentially that one, especially the way
Mm.
they're filming it. But you're right, perfectly. Because when I was younger, it was he was almost typecast to the under 14. I'd say it's Titanic, Romeo and Juliet. Everyone at that age has seen them at school or at home, etc. And you kind of had this like not a nasty way, but you kind of disliked him because you thought he's one of them. Then it's when he started getting into it, like that. I was sort of seeing his other performances, like, oh, there's a lot more to him than just that. and
Yeah.
he's really like bring on himself. But then like even outside of acting, like he is like an insane person in a good way. Like if you think in Romeo and Juliet, you are completely wrong. I mean, some of the stories of him is just mental, but there's
Mm.
so much tremendous respect for him because he's fantastic at what he does. And you're right, he does pick his roles carefully, and it'd be very easy for him to do bad films, but he very very rarely does them. I can't even think in my head of the last bad film he was in.
Yeah, same. And I think, to be honest, this film was one of the first ones that I started seeing this resurgence in his acting. So I'll always go back to this film as one of the ones that I think Leonardo DiCaprio really started to shine. This and Inception, obviously, they came out the same year, I think, as well. And then alongside him in the film is the other U.S. Marshal, played by Ruffalo. I'm going to be honest, I've never been a massive Ruffalo fan. He's okay. He always seems to be very sort of quiet and shy in all the roles I've seen him in. But obviously DiCaprio's the star of the show, and then Ruffalo's very much a supporting actor.
Yeah, and this is I kind of mentioned it. It's a lot harder to watch it the second time round. First time I
Yeah.
saw this, no Avengers, and then in this it was kind of like, oh, it's the Hulk. I kind of forgot you're in
Yes,
here.
I had the same
But
thing. Yeah.
then you're right. I mean, in this sounds very nasty. It's incredibly wooden, but it suits his
Mm.
character that he kind of hits the deliverers consistently. And obviously, when you build up that he's a doctor, you kind of understand that how his character's been like that. But it was just so hard for me to watch it and think of anything but Marvel because I mean, he's a great guy. You see the amount of charity work, Twitter and stuff. But to
Mm.
me, I think he's always going to be the Hulk now because he was so used to being like a sort of forgotten number two. Now he's got this big presence. It was
Mm.
quite hard to watch, especially when he like falls down the lighthouse bit. I was kind of there like turn green.
Yeah. By the way, you mentioned a bit about the ending as well. I probably should have opened with this review saying that there are going to be spoilers in this review, because there is a big twist at the end. But I'll put it in the description or the title or something that it's spoilers. And then two actors I really want to talk about in this film are Ben Kingsley, or sorry, Sir Ben Kingsley, and Max von Sydow, because to me these, alongside DiCaprio, are the two best additions to this film. Like Ben Kingsley is just amazing, and it just breaks my heart when I see him in films like Iron Man 3. You get an actor of that caliber, and that's the role they gave him in Iron Man
Nah,
3.
he was great in that. He is absolute. He was
Oh, I wouldn't
tremendous.
say he was.
He was having the time of his life filming that, and that as much as I like him, the reason I like him in Iron Man 3, if he's in Sexy Beast,
No, I haven't
that
seen
is
that.
the greatest Ben Kingsley perform. Oh, okay, maybe there's Gandhi. Gandhi was all right, but Sexy
Mm.
Beast is the pinnacle of his career, and it is without a doubt. If Iron Man 3 was clearly made based off that film, that's one you need to see.
Okay, I'll pick it as a recommended movie one time. We'll do a review on it.
Oh, definitely.
But yeah, and Ben Kingsley's really great in this film because obviously it plays into the whole, as I said earlier, like, is what's being told to DiCaprio true, or are they lying? If they are they covering something up? And he plays that role so well because he's very sort of calm and collected. He never like shouts or anything in the movie. He always retains that sort of composure to his character, and that's what makes him. He's not creepy, but you're always kind of second guessing him. It looks like there's something underneath. Whereas Max von Sydow's character, he is just straight up terrified in this film. Like he has a very cold and calculated delivery. And watching this again, it's making me so excited to see what character he's going to play in Force
That's
Awakens.
what I was thinking because I forgot he's in it, and it's when he comes out with his booming accent and the presence he has is like incredible. And I sat there thinking like, what is he gonna be? I want to know. Maybe we will soon, maybe we won't. But it's if you see some of his other films, Minority Report, he always. It sounds stupid, you know it's him, but he just
Mm.
has this presence where it's kind of like, oh, okay, I'm gonna listen now, and he just has that gravitas with him, and it's just great to see it. Although it was a minor role, every scene he's in, it's normally an important part.
Mm. And he has that great introduction in this film with like the classical music in the background. He's sitting in the leather armchair and he's kind of having this banter with Leonardo DiCaprio, but you could tell DiCaprio hates him all of a sudden because obviously DiCaprio. I keep calling all the characters by their actors' names. It's a bad habit of mine, but I'm gonna go with it anyway. Leonardo DiCaprio was obviously a soldier and fought to try and liberate the concentration camps during World War Two, and I think they hint that Max von Sydow's got some kind of connection to the Nazis, or he thinks he has, and so they automatically have that rivalry. But Sydow's just great. I need to see more films with him in because I'm struggling to think of any other film I've seen him in other than this. But
The
I know
he is
and aware of like good films that he's
he
been
is
in.
the mighty Ming from Flash.
Oh, of course he is. Yeah. Oh, I completely forgot about that. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't think many people will count that as like one of his great roles, but I will because I love Flash Gordon.
No, he's just funny in it, and
Yeah.
you know, that's because of Ted, I think.
And then I guess we could talk about Jackie Earl Haley, perhaps, for a minute. He only gets really one notable scene, but he just knocks that scene completely out the park. Like, I love Jackie Earl Haley. I'm a big fan of Watchmen. I know a lot of people weren't, but I thought he was great in that, and it's always good to see him getting work because he's fantastic.
Yeah, that's the thing. 'Cause I didn't know he was in this, and then when they started introducing him, I was like, he looks incredibly familiar. And then you kind of mentioned earlier, it's like, oh, it was voice act. And I was like, oh shit, because he's just awesome in it. But I think with him as an actor, in no like disrespect, because he looks a bit odd and a bit nasty, he perfectly suits the dark and gritty tone that this film's going for, and
Mm.
he kind of freaks you out when he's got the sort of cuts across him, and just seeing it was genuinely uncomfortable, but that played into it so much more because when he's given the dialogue, you kind of there listening, like concentrating, when it's like, oh, your flame's about to go out, then you're
Mm.
expecting something to happen, but he's just like chatting normally straight afterwards, so it's so unpredictable when he's on screen too.
Oh yeah, and they build that scene up so well. And actually, I think I said something wrong earlier in our review. I think I said that Jackie O'Haley played Ladis. He actually plays George Noyce. I got them confused. So I think I made a mistake there. But yeah, you're right. And that bit with the match, you're always on edge and you're sort of leaning forward in your seat because you're really interested to what he has to say. And they build it up really well before when Leonardo DiCaprio's walking down the corridor in the dark, and you've got all the other patients sort of clawing at him from the bars trying to get him. And it reminded me a lot actually of Silence of the Lambs, where Clarice walks to the end and the camera sort of follows her, and you get your look at Hannibal Lecter. It's very much the same where the camera sort of goes in and then you see Noyce in the corner. But yeah, it's only like a brief, like I'd say like 5 minute scene, but I think he was in all the trailers as well because and it does play an important part in the overall story as well, that scene. Um, but so they're your main players really with the actors. There's a few others we haven't mentioned, but they're your key players. And then we'll move into music now. I actually didn't realise this, but I just checked on Wikipedia and it says that no original score was made for this movie. Every bit of music you hear in it is previously recorded from various classical pieces and operas, stuff like that.
Yeah, I didn't know that, to be fair, until you just mentioned it, but it's what gets it is the notes when they're kind of walking. It kind of not like Inception, but you kind of have this like building boom that's going up, and it kind of builds it up, and it's awesome.
Mm. One thing I will say about the music though, which watching it again, um, I didn't. The music's great, but I think that especially in the opening, the music can get very bombastic. It's when they're driving into the asylum, when they're driving into Shutter Island. I think that the music could have reined back a bit and been a bit more subtle, a bit more sinister when it gets sort of B movie, monster movie sort of soundtrack in parts when they're approaching the thing, but there's also a track in the film which does work well, and it's in the scene where he has the Holocaust vision with what he believes to be his wife and daughter frozen in the ice. It's sort of this slow piano piece with like a few like orchestra stings in it, and that really works well. That's like a good sort of horror soundtrack, but I just question the sort of opening one with the bombastic nature of it. I think it could have dialed it back a little bit.
Yeah, there's some of it which doesn't work, but then bits do because what it does, it kind of captures the tension on. It would be very easy to have had some loud impending music on the scenes, but when it's a sort of moment where it's sort of what's the word? When they're kind of locked up, I forgot the word. You know, when you're like trapped.
Oh, like imprisoned,
Kind of.
claustrophobic.
That's
Yeah,
the
that
one.
you go.
That's the for the claustrophobic moments because you get a lot of them. It's very silent and it kind of builds up. You start thinking and thinking, and I think that's what the film does so well throughout.
Mm.
But sometimes it's too loud. Like it works perfectly at the start and end, and a tad bit in the middle. But there are one or two moments where it doesn't work.
And also, there's times where they know not to use any music and they just let the visuals do everything. And it's good when you can have. Obviously, there's no original music, so there's no composer, but the guy who collaborated all the music, what's his name? Robbie Robertson. He knew when to, pick the songs for which bits of the scene. And I guess that goes with Scorsese as well when he watches it back and he knows where he wants the music because he's like Tarantino with his music. If you watch Goodfellas or Casino, the soundtrack's brilliant. But I guess we can sort of go into our favourite bits and scenes now because I've got a few. But why don't you take this one first if any come to mind?
It's a really hard one because there's a lot of it that's about right, but it's not my favourite scene, but the scene that's got the biggest oh my god is when he gets home and it's the
Yeah.
children in the pond and he's like screaming and it kind of hits you and then he just like shoots her and like it's not a favourite bit but it's arguably the most important scene in the film in all honesty because if that bit doesn't work then the whole twist it's not believable the ending's ruined so it
Mm.
all came down to that and DiCaprio just sells that
You
perfectly.
you just picked my favourite scene as well. That for every reason you just said, and that was the moment where I was like, "Wow, DiCaprio is truly a great actor." The bit where he breaks down, you believe every moment of it, and you sort of put yourself in that character's shoes because obviously he's in there. Spoiler alert, for killing his wife. His wife. It's. I don't think it's ever said, but it's assumed that she's had some kind of depression and she's never got help for it. So she kills the kids. He comes back from work, finds that the kids have been drowned in the pool. He drags them out, and he's trying to, save them. And he's just sobbing. And it's so good. And you're right. That's everything was riding on that scene because that whole scene plays into the big twist for the end of the film. And both his performance and the person playing the wife, I don't know her name, but they both completely sell that scene.
Yeah, and it's all of it. It's when the kind of he's holding her. You know he's gonna shoot her, but it's even that bit when she's kind of a complete loony.
Mm,
You believe it, and the dynamic works. And what I like the fact is earlier on his sort of alter ego, you can say,
yeah.
he's kind of like, oh yeah, I was drinking after the war. It's never admitted, but when he gets home from work, he kind of has a quick shot. So it's whether that's implied or genuine. You kind of have these little things that match the continuity. But I think that whole scene's perfect from beginning to end because it would have been very easy for them to have left it after she got shot, have police come around, stuff like that. But to cut it when they do, it kind of gives you like the maximum effort from it.
Yeah, and I've just checked. Michelle Williams is the name of the actress who plays his wife in it, and it's good because it's such a complete 180 because we get visions of her throughout the film with him, and they obviously have that very romantic chemistry with each other. Then to see it in that bit, and obviously it's been building all the way through. You've never been quite sure what to believe, and then you get that great like monologue, that whole entire 5-10 minute scene, whatever it is, with Ben Kingsley at the end, where he just lays everything out, and you completely understand it. And they do that really cool thing where he has the names on the board and he says that they're the same letters, so he's like switch character's name. Basically, the twist is I don't really need to explain it if you've seen the film, but DiCaprio's just gone absolutely mental at what I've obviously seen his children drowned and then killing his wife. He's been admitted to Shutter Island. He's the missing patient he was actually searching for, and in his head, he's created this whole entire other reality where he can sort of justify his actions and keep peace of mind. And I think Ben Kingsley says something like he keeps resetting like a record player every single time. Like whenever they make a breakthrough, and he realizes the truth of the situation, he always reverts back to this fictional story he's created. But it's just cool to see it all play out. But as you say, and I guess we'll move into our next point now, is our impressions on the ending. how we opened the review, once you know the ending and you watch it again, I guess it might be cool for a second time viewing because when you know you can kind of watch it all back. But I think anything past two viewings, you know everything that happens and you know the twist, so it takes away a lot of the impact of the ending.
Yeah, I mean, I love it the second time around because you're always searching for, aha, that's built it, aha,
Mm.
and then I think the issue now was it doesn't have a blatant build up, which is very effective, but there's one or two scenes when it kind of feels very carried away when they're sort of hiding in the sheds away from the Shutter Island, and there's one or two bits, but sometimes it felt like they were trying to do too much. I can't remember whether that was added into the film or if it's in the book and they're staying like well to the source material, but it kind of you kind of disengage mindly from it. Whereas I remember the first time I saw it, I was just down the edge of my seat thinking the whole time, who is this person? Are they going to catch him? What happened to his wife? And and the build up to the twist is by far one of the better ones I've seen in cinema.
And you know that scene where Ben Kingsley explains the whole situation. That's very exposition filled and very like a lot of information being thrown at the viewer in one go. But for me anyway, you're so wrapped up in the film that you're intently listening to everything because you want to figure it out as much as Leonardo DiCaprio does.
Yeah, and it's the whole scene where they could have dramatically said, "Do drown them," cue music, cue some big thing happening, but no, he hits you again with some more sauce. And I like the fact because as a psychiatrist, Ben Kingsley has to do it that way rather than keep saying stuff out of the blue. And I think that's what kind of emphasises the impact of the twist and flashback when it happens. Is you kind of built it up for him to have been the poor guy.
And you do get the impression with Ben Kingsley all the way through the film that he does genuinely care about his patients. And I mean, he even says that we thought that letting you sort of play out this whole extended role play thing around Shutter Island for he's had the run of the place for 2 days, that he thought that would be enough to snap him out of it. And he's like, look, if we don't make a breakthrough now, the men in white coats are going to lobotomize you because you've assaulted guards and staff on the premises, and they're going to lobotomize you and basically turn you into a zombie. And I was actually just going to ask you your impressions on the ending. The final line, which he says, which would be worse, to live as a monster or die as a good man? Do you think that at that stage Leonardo DiCaprio was actually cured, but he was still faking it?
I think I think he's cured at the end of it because it seems like he's finally accepted his fate and that all of that, and that's only because the pressure of them threatening to kind of like lobotomize
Mm.
him. Do you know what I mean? So I think at the end it kind of drags on because you see him like sitting outside and stuff, but I think it works, and I think he is definitely like not normal, but he's better than he was. I think the sort of hallucination stuff's gone.
Mm. Well, what I take away from the ending is that he is actually cured, but when he says, what would be worse, to live as a monster or die as a good man, he's basically saying that although he's cured, it's so painful to live as he is because he knows what he's done and all the things he's seen in his life. So he'd rather die a good man by having the lobotomy, even though he's completely cured, because it would take all his pain away and he'd just be empty. And that would be better than living and going on with the rest of his life with those memories he's got in his mind. But the one thing I'll say about the ending is that I think it kind of beats you over the head with the last image. We learn throughout the film that the place where they carry out the lobotomies is in this lighthouse, and you get this. Obviously, I've just read it out twice. The great ending line, and Leonardo DiCaprio walking down the path to the doctors to lobotomize him. And I think that shot there is the last shot of the movie, what they could have used, and it would have been a much more powerful ending. But instead, we get the shot of the lighthouse before it goes to the credits, and it's like, well, we know they're taking him to the lighthouse. I just think it would have been a much more powerful ending if that was the last shot of him just walking down that path, cut to black, credits.
Yeah, actually, that would have been, but it would have reminded me of Seven to be fair,
Mm. Yeah.
because it has that grunge feeling as well throughout. But I think they're just trying to play it a bit nicer towards the audience because I think they want people to think he's all right now, stuff like that.
Oh, he's not going to be all right. They're leading him off to completely lobotomise him. But Yeah, I guess we'll wrap up now. So, overall thoughts: would you recommend Shutter Island? Although we've kind of spoilt the whole movie if you haven't watched it, but oh well.
Yeah, it's definitely one to watch if you haven't seen it. If you've seen it, then maybe go watch another film because it's great. But the first time round was the best time round watching this.
Oh yeah, and I'll agree with that. If you haven't seen it, apologies for spoiling it, but definitely go and see it. It's a great movie. As we said, the first time viewing is always the best for films like this with a twist. Um, and I'd actually probably say it's one of my favourite Scorsese films. It's not like the usual films he makes, so it's very refreshing to see him take on a genre like this because it proves that he can do it really well. The performances are great. One of DiCaprio's best roles, I would say. The atmosphere is good. If don't go into this expecting an outright horror though, although it has horror elements, it's very much a psychological thriller, and to me, they're my favourite kinds of horror films. The ones that are more psychological, gets into your brain, does make you think. I would say this film's good for a second viewing, but you don't really. I don't find myself going back to this film a lot. I've sort of seen it the once, seen it the twice, and obviously for this, and I don't know when I'll probably dip back into it again. But it's a solid film, great performances, and I would highly, highly recommend it. But that was our review for Shutter Island for this episode of Film Club. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/cinema savvy. We're also on Twitter at twitter.com/cinema underscore savvy. And we're also on letterbox.com/cinema underscore savvy, where you can check out a list of all the films we've reviewed and just keep a track of us that way as well. So be sure to come back Monday for our main show, where we'll be having our epic Pixar discussion. We'll be having a brief chat about every single film that Pixar have made, and we're going to try and work through them. There's a few I still need to watch, so I'm going to get on them over the weekend. And that's obviously going to be in anticipation for the latest Pixar film, Inside Out, which we don't get until the end of this month, unfortunately, but based on reviews from the US, I'm very much looking forward to that movie. So, yeah, be sure to come back Monday for that, and until then, thanks for listening.